A dedicated nurse violated every hospital protocol to rescue a trapped child from a burning building. Her heroic actions cost her everything she had worked for over 15 years. But 5 hours after losing her job, 20 black SUVs surrounded her modest home in Riverside, Colorado. What happened next would change her life forever and reveal a truth that left an entire community speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn morning air carried the crisp scent of pine needles. Through the open windows of Riverside General Hospital, Emma Rodriguez adjusted her pediatric nursing badge as she walked briskly down the familiar hallway, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the polished linoleum. The morning shift had just begun, and already the sounds of a busy hospital filled the corridors, distant conversations, the gentle beeping of monitors, and the occasional overhead page that echoed through the building. Emma had walked these same halls for 15 years, ever since she graduated from nursing school with honors and landed her dream job in pediatric care. At 38, she possessed the perfect combination of medical expertise and maternal instinct that made frightened children feel safe and helped worried parents find peace in the midst of crisis. Her colleagues often remarked that Emma had an uncanny ability to calm even the most distressed young patients with nothing more than her gentle voice and reassuring presence. Her husband Marcus often teased her about bringing work home, but Emma couldn't help herself. Children were her calling, her purpose, and every decision she made was filtered through a simple question: what would be best for the child? This philosophy had guided her through countless difficult cases, earned her the respect of doctors and administrators alike, and made her one of the most trusted nurses in the pediatric wing. This particular Tuesday morning seemed no different from any other. Emma checked her watch as she approached the nurses' station, where her colleague Jennifer Walsh was already reviewing patient charts for the day shift. Jennifer looked up with a warm smile, her graying hair pulled back in its customary neat bun. "Morning, Em. How's Sophia doing with her science project?" Jennifer asked, referring to Emma's 8-year-old daughter, who had been struggling with a challenging assignment about the water cycle. Emma's face lit up at the mention of her daughter. She finally got it last night. Marcus helped her build this elaborate model with cotton clouds and everything. You should see how proud she is. Emma pulled out her phone to show Jennifer a photo of Sophia beaming next to her project, her dark curls framing a gap-toothed smile that could melt the hardest heart. "She looks just like you at that age," Jennifer observed. "Same determined expression when she's figured something out." Emma laughed softly as she tucked the phone away. "Marcus says she gets that from me. Apparently I get this look when I'm focused on solving a problem." The two women settled into their morning routine, reviewing patient assignments and discussing care plans. Emma's first patient of the day was a 7-year-old boy recovering from appendix surgery, followed by a teenage girl dealing with complications from diabetes. Each case required careful attention to both medical needs and emotional support, something Emma provided naturally. As the morning progressed, Emma found herself drawn repeatedly to the large windows that faced Maple Street. From the 3rd floor of the hospital, she could see the apartment complex where many of the hospital staff lived, including several nurses who couldn't afford homes in Riverside's increasingly expensive housing market. The building was older, constructed in the 1970s with brick facades and small balconies that many residents had filled with plants and outdoor furniture. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the hospital supervisor, made her rounds through the pediatric ward around 10 o'clock. Dr. Coleman was a stern woman in her mid-50s who had built her career on strict adherence to hospital protocols and procedures. She believed that rules existed for good reasons, and that exceptions, no matter how well-intentioned, could lead to dangerous precedents. "Emma, I need to discuss the Morrison case with you," Dr. Coleman said, approaching the nurse's station with a thick file under her arm. The family is requesting that their son be discharged today, but I'm concerned about sending him home too early. Emma had been caring for 12-year-old Tyler Morrison, who had been admitted with severe pneumonia 3 days earlier. While his condition had improved significantly, Emma shared Dr. Coleman's concerns about an early discharge. His fever broke yesterday, but his breathing is still slightly labored, Emma explained. I think another day of observation would be wise. Sometimes parents get anxious to leave the hospital environment, but Tyler's not quite ready. Dr. Coleman nodded approvingly. Exactly my thinking. I'll speak with the parents this afternoon. Your medical instincts have always been excellent, Emma. It's why I trust your judgment with our most challenging cases. The compliment warmed Emma's heart. Recognition from Dr. Coleman was rare and precious, something that validated years of dedication and hard work. Emma had always prided herself on putting patient welfare above all other considerations, even when it meant having difficult conversations with families or advocating for unpopular treatment decisions. Around 11:30, Emma was in Tyler Morrison's room, checking his IV and adjusting his pillows, when she noticed something unusual outside the window. A thin column of smoke was rising from the direction of the Maple Street apartment complex. At first, she assumed it might be someone burning leaves or perhaps a small barbecue, but as she watched, the smoke grew thicker and darker. "Nurse Emma, is everything okay?" Tyler asked, noticing her distraction. Emma turned back to her young patient with a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I was just watching some clouds outside. How are you feeling? Any chest pain or difficulty breathing?" Tyler shook his head. "I feel much better today. My mom said maybe I can go home soon." "We'll see what the doctor says," Emma replied gently. "Sometimes our bodies need a little extra time to get completely better, even when we feel good." But even as she focused on Tyler's care, part of Emma's attention remained fixed on the window. The smoke was definitely getting worse, and she could now see what looked like flames flickering in one of the upper-floor windows of the apartment building. Her nursing instincts, honed by years of emergency situations, told her this was serious. Emma excused herself from Tyler's room and walked quickly to the nurse's station, where Jennifer was updating patient records on the computer. "Jen, look outside," Emma said, pointing toward the window. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "I think there's a fire at the Maple Street apartments." Jennifer followed Emma's gaze and immediately stood up, her face paling. "Oh my goodness, that's definitely a fire. We should call 911. "I'm sure someone already has," Emma replied, but she pulled out her cell phone anyway. As she dialed, she could hear the distant wail of sirens approaching. The emergency responders were already on their way. Through the window, both women watched as fire trucks arrived at the scene, their red lights flashing against the brick facade of the apartment building. Firefighters in heavy gear began deploying hoses and setting up equipment, while residents streamed out of the building, many still in their pajamas or hastily thrown on clothes. "Thank goodness everyone's getting out safely," Jennifer murmured. But Emma's trained eye caught something that made her stomach clench with worry. While most residents were evacuating through the main entrance, she could see people trapped on the upper floors, some appearing at windows and frantically waving for help. The fire seemed to be concentrated in the middle section of the building, blocking escape routes for those living on the higher floors. Emma's medical training had taught her to stay calm in crisis situations, but watching helpless people trapped in a burning building triggered every protective instinct she possessed. She found herself mentally cataloging potential injuries. Smoke, inhalation, burns, trauma from jumping or falling, and thinking about what medical supplies might be needed. "I should go down there," Emma said suddenly, surprising herself with the words. Jennifer looked at her with concern. "Emma, the firefighters are handling it. There's nothing we can do from here except be ready if they bring patients to the emergency room." Emma knew Jennifer was right. Hospital protocol was clear. Staff members were not supposed to leave their posts during work hours, especially not to rush toward emergency situations where they could become victims themselves. But as she watched the scene unfold, every fiber of her being screamed that she should be helping. Dr. Coleman appeared at the nurses' station, having noticed the commotion at the window. "What's the situation?" "Fire at the Maple Street apartments," Jennifer explained. "The fire department is already on scene." Dr. Coleman studied the distant emergency for a moment, then turned to Emma and Jennifer with her characteristic no-nonsense expression. "I want both of you to prepare the emergency department for potential incoming patients. Contact Dr. Stevens in the ER and let him know we may need additional staff. Emma, I need you to prepare burn treatment supplies and check our oxygen equipment." Emma nodded, grateful to have concrete tasks that would help the situation, even if indirectly. But as she hurried toward the supply room, she couldn't shake the image of those faces at the windows, desperately seeking help that seemed just out of reach. What Emma didn't know was that this moment, watching that fire from the hospital window, would become the pivotal point that would test everything she believed about her duty as a nurse, her responsibility as a human being, and the price she was willing to pay to save a child's life. The smoke continued to thicken outside the window, and somewhere in that building, 6-year-old Tommy Chen was hiding under his bed, too frightened to move, while his mother Lisa searched frantically through smoke-filled hallways, calling his name. Their lives and Emma's were about to intersect in a way that would change everything. As Emma gathered medical supplies, her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her heart raced with an urgency she couldn't explain. Something deep inside her knew that this fire would demand more than just preparing hospital rooms and waiting for patients to arrive. It would demand everything she had to give. The question was, would she be brave enough to give it? The piercing wail of multiple sirens shattered the relative quiet of the hospital corridor as Emma hurried back from the supply room, her arms full of burn treatment materials and emergency medications. Through every window she passed, the orange glow of flames grew brighter against the afternoon sky, casting an ominous light across the normally peaceful view of downtown Riverside. Dr. Stevens's voice crackled over the hospital intercom system, announcing a mass casualty alert. Emergency room staff were being called in from other departments, and all non-essential procedures were being postponed. Emma felt her pulse quicken as the familiar rush of medical emergency protocols kicked in. But something felt different this time. The usual professional detachment that helped her function during crises seemed impossible to maintain when she could literally see the disaster unfolding outside. Jennifer met her at the nurses' station, her face tight with worry. "Emma, they're saying the fire spread faster than expected. Something about old wiring and ventilation systems that are feeding the flames. The firefighters are having trouble getting to the upper floors." Emma set down her supplies and moved to the window again. The scene below had transformed into organized chaos. Multiple fire trucks surrounded the building, their extended ladders reaching toward windows where people could still be seen calling for help. Ambulances lined Maple Street, and she could see paramedics treating residents on the sidewalk for smoke inhalation and minor injuries. But it was what she couldn't see that worried her most. The middle section of the building was now completely engulfed in flames, creating a barrier that seemed to cut off escape routes for anyone still trapped on the upper floors. Emma's medical training automatically kicked in as she observed the situation, mentally triaging what she was witnessing and calculating response times and survival odds. Dr. Coleman appeared beside them, her usual composed demeanor showing cracks of concern. The fire chief just called. They're requesting additional medical support on scene. The emergency room is preparing to receive multiple patients, but they need experienced trauma nurses at the fire site to provide immediate care. Emma's heart jumped. I volunteer. Absolutely not, Dr. Coleman replied immediately. You're needed here. The patients we already have require continuous care, and we can't afford to send our most experienced pediatric nurse into a dangerous situation. Emma opened her mouth to argue, but Dr. Coleman held up a hand. This isn't a discussion. Emma, hospital policy is clear about staff leaving their assigned posts during emergencies. We help by being prepared to receive casualties, not by rushing toward danger. The logical part of Emma's mind understood Dr. Coleman's position completely. Hospital protocols existed for good reasons, and maintaining staffing levels during emergencies was crucial for patient care. But as she watched smoke billowing from the apartment building, every instinct she possessed as a nurse and as a mother screamed that she should be down there helping. Jennifer touched Emma's arm gently. Dr. Coleman's right. We can do more good here, preparing for whatever's coming. Emma nodded reluctantly, but her eyes remained fixed on the burning building. From this distance, she could see firefighters moving methodically through their rescue operations, but she also noticed something that made her stomach tighten with dread. Despite their efforts, there were still figures visible in several third-floor windows, and the flames seemed to be spreading upward faster than the rescuers could reach them. The next hour passed in a blur of emergency preparations. Emma helped set up additional treatment areas, checked and rechecked medical equipment, and coordinated with the emergency room staff about incoming patients. The first wave of fire victims began arriving around 1 o'clock, most suffering from smoke inhalation or minor burns. Emma found herself constantly glancing toward the windows, monitoring the progress of the fire, even as she focused on her hospital duties. Tyler Morrison's mother arrived during the chaos, demanding to take her son home immediately, despite the earlier decision to keep him for observation. Emma patiently explained the medical reasons for continued care, while simultaneously preparing IV fluids for expected burn victims. Mrs. Morrison became increasingly agitated, insisting that the hospital was just trying to make money by keeping Tyler longer than necessary. I understand your concerns, Emma said calmly, even as her attention was divided between Mrs. Morrison's complaints and the radio chatter from emergency responders that echoed through the hospital corridors. But Tyler's recovery isn't complete yet. His breathing improved, but his lungs are still healing from the pneumonia. Leaving too early could result in a serious relapse. Mrs. Morrison's voice rose. You people just want to keep us here forever. I know my own son and he's fine. I'm taking him home right now. Dr. Coleman intervened, supporting Emma's medical assessment and explaining the potential consequences of premature discharge. Mrs. Morrison finally agreed to wait until the following day, but not without making it clear that she considered the hospital's caution excessive and profit-motivated. As Mrs. Morrison stormed away, Emma felt the familiar weight of advocating for her patients' best interests, even when it meant disappointing their families. It was one of the most challenging aspects of pediatric nursing, balancing medical necessity with parental anxiety and expectations. By 2 o'clock, the emergency room was treating 15 fire victims, and reports from the scene indicated that firefighters had successfully evacuated most of the building's residents. Emma allowed herself to feel a moment of relief, thinking the worst was over. She was updating patient charts when Jennifer appeared at her side, her face pale with fresh worry. Emma, there's been a development. They think there might still be a child trapped on the 3rd floor. A mother can't find her 6-year-old son, and she's certain he was in their apartment when the fire started. Emma's blood ran cold. What do you mean they think? Don't they know for sure? Jennifer shook her head. The smoke is too thick for the firefighters to do a thorough search of that section. The mother, Lisa Chen, is hysterical. She keeps saying her son Tommy gets scared and hides when there's loud noises or chaos. She thinks he might be hiding somewhere in the apartment, too frightened to come out, even when the firefighters call for him. Emma's hands stilled on the patient chart she was updating. Every detail Jennifer shared painted a clearer picture of a terrified child, alone in a burning building, possibly too scared to respond to rescue attempts. She thought of her own daughter Sophia, how she sometimes hid under her bed during thunderstorms and felt a physical pain in her chest at the thought of any child facing such terror. "Are they still searching?" Emma asked. "The fire chief is calling it too dangerous. The structural integrity of that section is compromised, and they can't risk losing firefighters for what might be a false alarm. The mother might be wrong about the boy being inside." Emma walked to the window again, studying the burning building with new urgency. The third floor, where Tommy Chen might be trapped, was directly in her line of sight, and she could see that, while flames hadn't fully engulfed that section yet, smoke was pouring out of every opening. If a child was indeed hiding in there, time was running out quickly. Dr. Coleman joined them at the window, having overheard their conversation. "It's a tragic situation, but the fire department knows what they're doing. If they've determined it's too dangerous to continue searching, we have to trust their judgment." "But what if they're wrong?" Emma asked quietly. "What if there really is a child in there?" "Then we pray for a miracle," Dr. Coleman replied. "But we don't second-guess. Emergency professionals who are trained for exactly these situations." Emma nodded, but her mind was racing. She understood the logic of the fire chief's decision, but she also understood something about frightened children that the firefighters might not fully appreciate. A scared 6-year-old might not respond to strangers calling his name, especially if those strangers were wearing frightening equipment and speaking in loud, urgent voices. But he might respond to someone who approached differently, someone who understood how to communicate with terrified children. The afternoon wore on, and Emma threw herself into her hospital duties with forced concentration. She checked on Tyler Morrison, whose condition continued to improve steadily. She assisted with 3 more fire victims who arrived with various degrees of smoke inhalation. She updated charts, administered medications, and maintained the professional composure that had defined her nursing career. But beneath the surface, her thoughts remained consumed by the image of Tommy Chen, possibly hiding somewhere in that burning building while rescue opportunities slipped away. She found herself calculating how long a child could survive in a smoke-filled environment, how quickly carbon monoxide poisoning could become fatal, and what the survival odds were for someone trapped in the circumstances Jennifer had described. Around 4 o'clock, Emma was in the medication room preparing evening doses when she overheard a conversation between 2 paramedics who had just brought in another patient. They were discussing the apartment fire, and one mentioned that the search had been officially called off. The fire department had declared the building structurally unsound, and Lisa Chen had been told that her son was most likely not in the building after all. "Poor woman is beside herself," one paramedic said, "but there's nothing more anyone can do. That section of the building is going to collapse soon." Emma's hands trembled as she measured out medications. The finality of the search being called off hit her like a physical blow. If Tommy Chen was indeed in that building, he was going to die, and everyone was going to convince themselves that he had never been there in the first place, because the alternative was too horrible to accept. She finished preparing the medications and walked slowly back to the nurse's station, her mind churning with thoughts she couldn't quite organize. The logical part of her brain agreed with every decision that had been made. The fire department was right to prioritize the safety of their personnel. Dr. Coleman was right to maintain hospital staffing during an emergency. The entire system was functioning exactly as it was designed to function. But another part of her mind, the part that had guided her through 15 years of caring for children, was screaming that systems and protocols meant nothing if a child was dying while everyone followed the rules. Jennifer noticed Emma's distressed expression as she returned to the station. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emma set down the medication tray with unsteady hands. "They've called off the search. If Tommy Chen is in that building, they're just going to let him die. Emma, you don't know that he's actually in there. His mother might be wrong. Children get confused during emergencies, and maybe he was with a neighbor or friend when the fire started. And maybe he's hiding under his bed right now, too scared to move, while the building burns down around him," Emma replied, her voice tight with emotion. Jennifer studied Emma's face with growing concern. "You're thinking about Sophia, aren't you? About how she hides during thunderstorms?" Emma nodded, unable to deny it. Her daughter's tendency to retreat to small, enclosed spaces when she was frightened had made the description of Tommy Chen's possible situation feel intensely personal. She could imagine exactly how a scared 6-year-old might react to the chaos of a fire, the overwhelming noise and confusion that would make hiding seem like the safest option. "That's exactly why you need to stay here and do your job," Jennifer said gently. "You're too emotionally invested in this situation to think clearly. Sometimes the hardest part of being a nurse is accepting that we can't save everyone." Emma knew Jennifer was right, just as she knew Dr. Coleman was right, just as she knew the fire chief was right. Everyone was making reasonable, logical decisions, based on established protocols and professional expertise. The problem was that logic and protocols might not be enough to save Tommy Chen's life. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of routine nursing duties performed with mechanical precision, while Emma's thoughts remained consumed by the burning building visible through every window. By 5 o'clock, the fire had spread through most of the structure, and she could see that the section where Tommy might be trapped was starting to show signs of structural damage. Emma found herself standing at the window during a brief break, watching smoke pour from the third-floor windows, and calculating how much time might be left before that section of the building became completely uninhabitable. Her nursing training provided clinical estimates of survival times in smoke-filled environments, but her maternal instincts provided something else entirely, a desperate certainty that somewhere in that building a child was fighting for his life while the world decided he probably didn't exist. Dr. Coleman approached, following Emma's gaze toward the fire. "The emergency room chief says we've treated all the serious casualties. A few more people with minor smoke inhalation, but everyone else is stable. It looks like the firefighters did an excellent job getting people out safely." "Everyone except Tommy Chen," Emma said quietly. Dr. Coleman sighed. "Emma, you're torturing yourself with something that's out of your control." The child's mother was traumatized and confused. It's entirely possible that Tommy was never in the building at all. These things happen during emergencies. Families get separated and panicked. Parents sometimes have inaccurate information. Emma turned to face Dr. Coleman directly. "And what if you're wrong? What if there really is a 6-year-old boy trapped in there right now, and we're all standing here convincing ourselves that he doesn't exist because it's easier than admitting we're too afraid to save him?" Dr. Coleman's expression hardened. "That's enough, Emma. I understand you're upset, but you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Our responsibility is to the patients in this hospital, not to chase after hypothetical emergencies that trained professionals have already addressed." Emma nodded and returned to her duties, but Dr. Coleman's words only strengthened her growing conviction that something was fundamentally wrong with accepting Tommy Chen's possible death, simply because saving him would require someone to break the rules. As her shift neared its end, Emma found herself facing a choice that would define not just her career, but her understanding of what it truly meant to be a nurse, a mother, and a human being. The building was still burning, time was running out, and everyone had decided that the safe, reasonable thing to do was nothing. The question was whether Emma Rodriguez had the courage to choose something other than safe and reasonable. The question was whether she was willing to risk everything she had worked for to save a child who might not even exist. Looking at the burning building one more time, Emma realized that she already knew the answer. She just hadn't admitted it to herself yet. Emma's shift officially ended at 6 o'clock, but she remained at the nurse's station, mechanically organizing patient files while her mind wrestled with an impossible decision. The hospital had returned to its normal evening rhythm, with the emergency influx of fire victims now settled into treatment routines. Through the windows, the orange glow of flames had intensified as the fire consumed more of the apartment building's upper floors. Jennifer was preparing to leave for the day when she noticed Emma's distracted state. "You should go home to Sophia and Marcus. There's nothing more you can do here, and tomorrow's going to be another busy day." Emma nodded absently, her eyes fixed on the distant building where smoke continued to pour from the third-floor windows. The section where Tommy Chen might be trapped showed new signs of structural stress, with visible sagging around one of the window frames. If he was in there, she estimated he had perhaps 30 minutes before that part of the building became completely uninhabitable. "Emma." Jennifer's voice carried a note of concern. "Go home. You're torturing yourself over something that's out of your hands." "What if it's not out of my hands?" Emma asked quietly, finally turning to meet Jennifer's gaze. "What if I'm the only person who can actually help him?" Jennifer's expression grew alarmed. "Emma, you're not thinking clearly. You cannot go to that fire. You're a nurse, not a firefighter. You have no training for that kind of rescue, and you'd only succeed in getting yourself killed." Emma stood slowly, her decision crystallizing with each word Jennifer spoke. Everything her colleague said was absolutely correct from a logical standpoint, but logic wasn't the only consideration here. Sometimes being right according to the rules meant being wrong according to conscience. "I have training that the firefighters don't," Emma said, her voice growing steadier with conviction. "I know how to communicate with frightened children. I understand childhood trauma responses. If Tommy is hiding because he's scared, he might not respond to strangers in heavy gear shouting his name, but he might respond to someone who knows how to approach scared kids." Jennifer stepped closer, her face pale with understanding of what Emma was suggesting. "Emma, no. This is insane. Even if you could somehow get into that building, which you can't, and even if you could find a child who might not exist, you'd never get out again. The fire department sealed off that section because it's about to collapse." Emma moved toward her locker, retrieving her jacket and car keys with deliberate movements. "Jennifer, if Sophia was trapped in a burning building, and everyone had given up looking for her because it was too dangerous, wouldn't you want someone to try? Wouldn't you want just one person to care more about saving her life than following safety protocols?" The question hung in the air between them, and Emma saw the moment when Jennifer understood that no logical argument would change her friend's mind. This wasn't about medical protocol or hospital policy anymore. This was about Emma's fundamental beliefs about what it meant to be responsible for protecting children. "If you do this, you'll lose your job," Jennifer said quietly. "Dr. Coleman will have no choice but to fire you for abandoning your post and violating safety policies. 15 years of your career gone." Emma paused at her locker, her hand resting on her nursing badge that bore her name and the pediatric wing designation she'd worn with pride for so many years. The weight of Jennifer's words settled over her like a physical burden. Her career at Riverside General wasn't just a job. It was her identity, her purpose, her contribution to the world. Losing it would mean starting over at 38, probably, at another hospital that would be reluctant to hire a nurse with a record of policy violations. But as she looked through the window at the burning building one more time, Emma realized that keeping her job while a child died would destroy something in her that no career could replace. She would never be able to look at another frightened child in the pediatric ward without wondering if she could have saved Tommy Chen. "Then I'll find another job," Emma said simply, removing her hospital ID badge and placing it carefully in her locker. "But I can't find another conscience." Jennifer made one last desperate attempt to dissuade her. "Emma, even if you're right about everything, even if Tommy is in there and you can reach him, how do you plan to get past the fire department barricades? They've sealed off the entire area. You'll be arrested before you get within a block of the building." Emma had been thinking about this problem throughout the afternoon, and she'd identified a possible solution. The apartment building backed up to Pine Creek, a small waterway that ran behind several residential blocks. During her lunch breaks, Emma sometimes walked along the creek path for exercise, and she knew it was possible to approach the building from the back without going through the main street where the emergency vehicles and barricades were concentrated. "There's a way," Emma said, pulling on her jacket. "The creek path runs right behind the building. I can get close enough to assess the situation without interfering with the official rescue operations." Jennifer shook her head in disbelief. "Assess the situation? Emma, you're talking about entering a burning building. This isn't an assessment. This is a suicide mission." Emma picked up her purse and car keys, feeling the strange calm that comes with making an irrevocable decision. "Jennifer, I need you to do something for me. If something happens to me, I need you to explain to Marcus and Sophia why I had to do this. Help them understand that sometimes people have to choose between what's safe and what's right." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, please don't do this. Please just go home to your family." Emma hugged her friend tightly, knowing this might be the last time she saw her as a colleague at Riverside General. "Take care of Tyler Morrison. Make sure his mother understands why he needs to stay until tomorrow. Don't let her take him home too early." Jennifer held on to the embrace as if she could physically prevent Emma from leaving. "This is madness. You're throwing away everything for a child who probably isn't even there." Emma pulled back gently, meeting Jennifer's tear-filled gaze with steady determination. "And if he is there, I'm the only chance he has." Emma left the hospital through the staff parking garage, avoiding the main entrance where Dr. Coleman might see her leaving. As she walked to her car, she felt the weight of her decision settling over her like a physical presence. In the space of a few hours, she had chosen to abandon everything that defined her professional life for the possibility of saving one child's life. The drive to the Pine Creek access road took 15 minutes through Riverside's quiet residential neighborhoods. Emma used the time to mentally prepare for what she was about to attempt, drawing on every piece of emergency medical training she'd ever received. She thought about smoke inhalation treatment, burn care, and trauma response procedures. She also thought about child psychology and the best approaches for communicating with frightened children in crisis situations. Most importantly, she thought about Sophia and how desperately she would want someone to save her daughter if their situations were reversed. That thought alone was enough to dispel any remaining doubts about her decision. The creek path was deserted when Emma parked her car and began walking toward the apartment building. From this angle, she could see the full extent of the fire's damage and the ongoing efforts to contain it. Multiple fire trucks surrounded the front of the building, their lights creating a strobing red and blue glow against the evening sky. Firefighters continued to pour water on the flames, but it was clear that saving the structure was no longer the priority. They were focused on preventing the fire from spreading to adjacent buildings. As Emma approached the back of the apartment building, She could see that this side had sustained less fire damage than the front, though smoke was pouring from several windows. The third-floor section where Tommy might be trapped was still structurally intact, though she could see scorch, marks around the windows, and signs of heat damage to the exterior walls. Emma studied the building's rear entrance, calculating possible access routes and escape paths. The back door appeared to be unlocked, probably from residents fleeing through any available exit during the initial evacuation. A fire escape ladder provided access to the upper floors, though she could see that the metal was already heating from the fire's proximity. Standing at the edge of the creek, Emma pulled out her cell phone and called Marcus. Her husband answered on the second ring, his voice warm with the comfortable routine of their evening conversations. "Hey, honey, how was your day? I heard about the apartment fire on the news. Were you guys busy with casualties?" Emma's throat tightened as she heard the normalcy in Marcus's voice, the assumption that she was calling from the hospital after a routine, if busy, day. In a few minutes, she was going to destroy that normalcy forever. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." Emma's voice was steady, despite the enormity of what she was about to confess. "There's a child who might be trapped in the burning building. The fire department has given up searching for him, but I think he's still alive." Marcus's voice immediately shifted to concern. "Emma, what are you talking about? If the fire department says it's clear, then it's clear. Why would you think otherwise?" Emma explained about Tommy Chen, about his mother's certainty that he was in the apartment, about the child's tendency to hide when frightened. She described her growing conviction throughout the afternoon that everyone was making a terrible mistake by assuming the boy wasn't there. "Emma, where are you right now?" Marcus's voice carried a note of alarm, as if he was beginning to understand where this conversation was heading. "I'm behind the apartment building. I'm going to try to find him." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could hear Marcus processing the implications of her words, understanding that his wife was about to risk her life for a child who might not exist. "Emma, no. Come home right now. This is not your responsibility. You have Sophia to think about. You have me to think about. You can't risk your life for someone else's child." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of Marcus's words. He was absolutely right from every rational perspective. She did have responsibilities to her own family that should take precedence over a stranger's child. But she also knew that if she walked away now, she would never be able to live with herself. "Marcus, I know this doesn't make sense from the outside. I know it seems like I'm choosing someone else's child over our family. But if I don't try to save Tommy, and he dies because I was too afraid to act, then I'll never be the same person again. I'll never be the mother Sophia deserves, or the wife you fell in love with." Marcus's voice broke slightly. "Emma, you could die in there. Then Sophia loses her mother and I lose my wife. And for what? For a child who probably isn't even there." "And if he is there," Emma asked quietly, "if Tommy Chen burns to death tonight because no one was brave enough to save him, how do I explain that to Sophia someday? How do I teach her to be compassionate and courageous when I chose safety over doing what was right?" Emma heard Marcus take a shuddering breath, and she knew he was fighting the same internal battle she had faced in the hospital. His protective instincts as a husband and father warred with his understanding of who she was as a person, what motivated her, what made her the woman he had married. "Emma, please just come home. We'll figure out another way to help. We'll donate money to the family. We'll volunteer with fire victims. We'll do something that doesn't involve you risking your life." Emma looked up at the third-floor windows, where smoke continued to pour out, calculating that she had perhaps 20 minutes before that section of the building became completely impassable. If Tommy was in there, every minute of delay reduced his chances of survival. Marcus, I love you and Sophia more than anything in the world, but that love doesn't make me a different person than I was when you met me. You fell in love with someone who couldn't walk away from a child in danger. I'm still that person." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with resignation and fear. "What do you need me to do?" Emma felt tears spring to her eyes at the recognition in his voice. Despite his terror for her safety, Marcus understood that this decision was fundamentally about who she was, not just what she was choosing to do. "Call 911 and tell them that a hospital nurse is attempting a rescue from the back of the building. Give them my name and description. If I find Tommy, I'll need paramedics standing by." "And if you don't find him?" Marcus asked quietly. Emma looked at the burning building one more time, seeing fresh flames flickering in a fourth-floor window, and knowing that time was running out for any kind of rescue attempt. "Then at least we'll know for sure," she said simply. "At least his mother will know that someone tried?" Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Emma, I love you. Please be careful. Please come back to us. I love you too. Kiss Sophia for me and tell her Mommy had to help someone." Emma ended the call and put her phone in her jacket pocket, knowing it might be the last conversation she ever had with her husband. The weight of that possibility settled over her as she approached the back entrance of the burning building, but it wasn't enough to change her mind. Standing at the door, Emma took several deep breaths of the cool, evening air, knowing that once she entered the building, every breath would be precious and dangerous. She thought about Tommy Chen, somewhere above her, possibly hiding under a bed or in a closet while smoke filled his lungs and flames crept closer. She thought about Sophia, safe at home with her father, trusting that her mother would always do the right thing even when it was difficult. She thought about all the children she had cared for over 15 years of nursing and how their trust had shaped her understanding of what it meant to be responsible for protecting the innocent. Emma Rodriguez pushed open the back door of the burning apartment building and stepped into the smoke-filled hallway, carrying with her 15 years of medical training, a mother's understanding of frightened children, and the desperate hope that she wasn't too late to save Tommy Chen's life. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality, sealing her inside a building that everyone else had given up on, beginning the most important 20 minutes of her life. The moment Emma stepped inside the apartment building, the world transformed into something from a nightmare. Thick, acrid smoke hung in the air like a living thing, stinging her eyes and making each breath a deliberate effort. The temperature hit her like opening an oven door, and she immediately understood why the firefighters had declared this area too dangerous for continued search operations. Emma pulled her jacket up over her nose and mouth, creating a makeshift filter as she oriented herself in the smoky hallway. The building's layout was typical of 1970s construction, with a central staircase leading to upper floors and apartments branching off long corridors. Emergency lighting cast an eerie glow through the haze, and she could hear the distant sound of water hitting flames as firefighters continued their efforts from the front of the building. Her medical training kicked in immediately, assessing her own condition and calculating how long she could safely remain in this environment. The smoke concentration suggested she had perhaps 15 minutes before carbon monoxide levels became life-threatening, assuming she could maintain access to relatively cleaner air near the floor. Every moment spent searching was a moment borrowed against her own survival. Emma dropped to her hands and knees, knowing that smoke rises and that breathable air would be closer to the ground. The hallway carpet was warm beneath her palms, and she could feel the vibration of the building's structure responding to the fire's assault. Moving carefully but quickly, she began making her way toward the staircase that would take her to the third floor, where Tommy Chen's apartment was located. The stairwell was marginally clearer than the hallway, with some ventilation coming from a broken window on the second-floor landing. Emma paused there for a moment, gulping relatively fresh air and assessing her physical condition. Her eyes were streaming from smoke irritation, her throat burned, and she could feel the beginnings of respiratory distress. But her mind remained clear and focused, driven by the image of a frightened 6-year-old hiding somewhere above her. As she climbed toward the 3rd floor, Emma began calling Tommy's name in the specific tone she had learned to use with scared children during her years in pediatric nursing. Her voice was calm and reassuring, cutting through the chaos with the kind of authority that frightened children instinctively trusted. "Tommy, my name is Emma. I'm a nurse, and I'm here to help. Your mummy sent me to find you. You're not in trouble, sweetheart. I just want to make sure you're safe." She paused on each step, listening for any response that might indicate the child's location. The building creaked and groaned around her, punctuated by the distant sounds of emergency operations, but she heard nothing that suggested a child's presence. The 3rd floor hallway was significantly worse than the levels below. Smoke was so thick that Emma could barely see 3 feet in front of her, and the heat was becoming genuinely dangerous. She could feel her jacket growing warm against her back, and knew that she was pushing the limits of what an untrained person could endure in a fire environment. Emma had memorized the apartment numbers from her conversation with Jennifer, and she knew that the Chen family lived in apartment 3C, roughly halfway down the corridor. But as she crawled along the hallway, checking door numbers through the smoke, she realized that finding the right apartment was only the beginning of her challenge. Apartment 3C's door was unlocked, hanging slightly ajar in a way that suggested hasty evacuation. Emma pushed it open and immediately felt a wave of superheated air that made her pull back instinctively. The apartment's living room was filled with smoke so dense it was like crawling through grey cotton, and she could see the orange glow of flames somewhere deeper in the unit. "Tommy!" Emma called, her voice strained but still maintaining the calm tone she used with frightened patience. "Tommy, it's Emma the nurse. I know you might be scared, but I need you to call out to me so I can find you. Your mom is waiting for you outside, and she's very worried." Emma began a systematic search of the apartment, staying low to the floor, where the air was marginally cleaner. The layout was typical of family housing, with a small living room leading to a kitchen and bedrooms down a short hallway. She checked behind the couch, in the kitchen cabinets, and under the dining room table, all places where a frightened child might instinctively hide. The hallway leading to the bedrooms was like entering the mouth of a furnace. Heat radiated from the walls, and Emma could see that flames had already consumed part of the ceiling above the back bedroom. She knew that she was now in immediate danger, that the structural integrity of this section was compromised, but she also knew that if Tommy was hiding anywhere, it would be in a bedroom that felt familiar and safe. "Tommy, I know you're scared of the noise and the smoke, but I need you to be very brave right now. I'm going to count to 3, and then I need you to call my name as loud as you can. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Emma held her breath, straining to hear any response over the crackling of flames and the groaning of stressed building materials. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, so faint she almost missed it, she heard a small voice from what appeared to be the back bedroom. "I'm scared." Emma's heart leaped with a mixture of relief and terror. Tommy was alive, but he was in the most dangerous part of the apartment, the section where flames were already visible and the ceiling showed signs of imminent collapse. Getting to him would require her to crawl directly into the fire zone, and getting both of them out would test the limits of what was physically possible. "Tommy, that's perfect. You're being so brave. I'm coming to get you right now, okay? I need you to keep talking to me so I can find you. Can you tell me where you are in the room?" "Under the bed," came the small voice, barely audible over the increasing roar of flames. "I can't see anything. It's too hot." Emma began crawling down the hallway toward the back bedroom, feeling the temperature increase dramatically with each foot of progress. The carpet beneath her hands was now uncomfortably warm, and she could see that flames had already consumed much of the ceiling above her destination. Time was running out not just for rescue, but for the structural integrity of this section of the building. That's great, Tommy. Under the bed is a smart place to hide. I'm almost there. When I get to your room, I'm going to crawl under the bed with you, and then we're going to crawl out together. It might seem scary, but I'm going to be right with you the whole time. Emma reached the bedroom doorway and felt a wave of heat that was almost unbearable. The room was like the inside of an oven, with flames consuming the upper portion of the walls and spreading across the ceiling. Visibility was near zero, but she could make out the dark shape of a bed against the far wall. Tommy, I can see your bed. I'm crawling over to you right now. Keep talking to me, sweetheart. It's too hot, Tommy whimpered. I want my mommy. I know you do, and your mommy wants you too. She's waiting for us outside. I'm going to get you to her, but I need you to be brave for just a little bit longer. Emma reached the bed and dropped to her belly, crawling underneath where she found Tommy Chen curled in a tight ball against the wall. The 6-year-old was conscious, but clearly suffering from smoke inhalation, his breathing shallow and labored. In the dim light filtering through the smoke, she could see that he had wrapped his shirt around his face in an instinctive attempt to filter the air. "Hi, Tommy," Emma said softly, her voice carrying the same gentle authority she used with frightened patients in the hospital. "I'm Emma, and I'm here to take you to your mommy. You did such a good job hiding and protecting yourself." Tommy looked at her with wide, frightened eyes, but she could see the recognition of an adult authority figure that every child was trained to trust. Despite his terror, some part of him understood that help had arrived. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Emma asked, quickly assessing the child for obvious injuries while simultaneously calculating their escape route. Tommy shook his head, though his breathing indicated significant smoke inhalation. Emma pulled off her jacket and wrapped it around Tommy, creating additional protection for the journey out of the building. The boy was small for his age, probably weighing no more than 40 pounds, which meant she could carry him if necessary. But she also knew that crawling while carrying a child would be exponentially more difficult and dangerous. "Tommy, we need to crawl out of here together. I'm going to stay right beside you, and we're going to go very fast. The air will get better as we get closer to the door. Can you do that with me?" Tommy nodded, though his expression remained terrified. Emma could see that shock was beginning to set in, which could actually work in their favor by making him more compliant and less likely to panic during the escape. Emma began crawling backward out from under the bed, keeping one hand on Tommy to maintain contact. As they emerged into the main part of the bedroom, the heat hit them like a physical blow. The ceiling above them was now completely engulfed in flames, and she could see that part of it was beginning to sag ominously. "Stay right with me, Tommy. We're going to crawl very fast now." Emma began moving toward the bedroom door, with Tommy beside her, both of them staying as low as possible to avoid the worst of the heat and smoke. The carpet beneath them was now hot enough to burn exposed skin, and Emma could feel her clothing beginning to smolder in places where it made contact with the superheated surfaces. They reached the bedroom doorway just as a section of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending a shower of burning debris across the bed where Tommy had been hiding just moments before. The sound was deafening, and Tommy whimpered in terror. But Emma kept moving, pulling him along with words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Tommy. We're almost out of the scary part. Just stay right with me." The hallway leading back to the apartment's main door felt endless, though Emma knew it was probably no more than 20 feet. The smoke was so thick now that she was navigating by memory and touch, feeling along the wall while keeping Tommy close beside her. Her lungs burned with each breath, and she could feel herself becoming lightheaded from carbon monoxide exposure. But they reached the apartment door, and suddenly the air was marginally cleaner. Emma allowed herself one moment to gulp relatively fresh air before beginning the final phase of their escape down the building's main staircase. "Tommy, we're almost out. Just a little bit more crawling, and then we'll be outside where your mommy is waiting." The staircase descent was treacherous, with smoke reducing visibility to almost nothing, and the structure showing signs of stress from the fire's assault. Emma stayed in front of Tommy, testing each step before allowing him to follow. Her medical training helped her monitor both their conditions, recognizing the signs of severe smoke inhalation in both of them while calculating how much longer they could maintain consciousness. They reached the second-floor landing, then the first floor, and finally the main hallway leading to the back exit Emma had used to enter the building. With each step, the air became cleaner and the temperature more bearable. Tommy was still, conscious and moving, though Emma could see that he was reaching the limits of his endurance. "Tommy, look ahead. Do you see that light? That's the door that leads outside to your mommy." The back door of the building appeared through the smoke like a beacon, with clean evening air flowing through the gap beneath it. Emma felt a surge of hope and determination as they crawled those final feet towards safety. Emma pushed open the door, and they emerged into the cool evening air like swimmers breaking the surface of water. The contrast was so dramatic that for a moment Emma couldn't process the sensation of breathing air that didn't burn her lungs. Tommy collapsed on the grass behind the building, coughing violently but breathing. Emma rolled onto her back beside him, her body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. They had made it out alive, but even as Emma lay there gasping for breath, she could hear new sounds that made her heart race with a different kind of concern. Sirens were approaching from multiple directions, and she could hear shouting voices that suggested emergency responders had been alerted to their presence. Marcus had kept his promise to call 911, which meant paramedics were coming to help Tommy. But it also meant that in a matter of minutes, Emma would have to face the consequences of her decision to violate every hospital protocol and risk her life for a child who everyone else had given up on. As Tommy Chen coughed and wheezed beside her, very much alive despite everyone's assumption that he didn't exist, Emma realized that whatever happened next, she had made the right choice. The cost might be enormous, but the alternative would have been unthinkable. Paramedics burst around the corner of the building, followed closely by firefighters and police officers. Emma watched as they immediately began treating Tommy for smoke inhalation. Their professional efficiency, a beautiful sight after the chaos and terror of the past 30 minutes. One paramedic approached Emma, checking her vital signs and asking questions about her condition. But even as she answered their medical inquiries, her attention remained focused on Tommy Chen, the 6-year-old boy who was alive because someone had finally been willing to look for him in the right place. Whatever came next, Emma knew she could face it. She had saved a child's life, and that was worth everything she was about to lose. The emergency room at Riverside General felt different when Emma returned as a patient rather than a nurse. She sat on the examination table, oxygen mask covering her face, watching the familiar dance of medical professionals that she had been part of just hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now receiving care in the same pediatric wing where she had spent 15 years of her career. Dr. Stevens finished his examination, noting mild smoke inhalation, but no serious injuries. "You're extremely lucky, Emma. Another few minutes in that environment, and we'd be looking at severe respiratory damage or worse." His tone carried professional concern mixed with bewilderment at her actions. Through the thin hospital curtain, Emma could hear Tommy Chen in the next bed, his young voice answering questions from medical staff, while his mother, Lisa, sobbed with relief nearby. The sound of his breathing, steady despite the ordeal, was the most beautiful thing Emma had ever heard. Whatever consequences she faced, that sound made everything worthwhile. Marcus arrived within 20 minutes, his face pale with fear and exhaustion. He rushed to Emma's bedside, taking her hand while studying her soot-stained face and singed hair. "Are you okay? Really okay?" Emma nodded, pulling off the oxygen mask temporarily. "I'm fine. Tommy's fine. That's what matters." Marcus sat heavily in the chair beside her bed, running his hands through his hair. "Emma, do you have any idea what you've done? Dr. Coleman has already been here asking questions. There's going to be an investigation, probably disciplinary action. Your career at this hospital is over." Emma had expected this news, but hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a physical blow. 15 years of building relationships with colleagues, learning the intricacies of pediatric care, establishing herself as a trusted professional. All of it gone because she couldn't follow protocol when a child's life was at stake. "I know," she said quietly. "I knew when I made the decision." Marcus squeezed her hand. "The media is already picking up the story. Someone recorded video of you carrying Tommy out of the building. It's all over social media. People are calling you a hero, but the hospital administration sees it differently." Before Emma could respond, the curtain was pulled back and Dr. Coleman appeared, her expression unreadable. The supervisor looked tired and stressed, her usually impeccable appearance showing signs of the long day's crisis management. "Emma, I need to speak with you officially about today's events." Dr. Coleman's voice carried the weight of administrative duty rather than personal emotion. "Your actions violated multiple hospital policies regarding staff safety and abandonment of assigned duties during emergency situations." Emma sat up straighter, meeting Dr. Coleman's gaze directly. "I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure you comprehend the full implications of what you've done. You left your post during a mass casualty event, entered a dangerous situation without authorization, and put yourself at risk in a way that could have required additional emergency resources to rescue you. Your actions, however well-intentioned, compromised hospital operations and violated every safety protocol we have." Marcus started to speak, but Emma touched his arm, indicating she wanted to handle this herself. "Dr. Coleman, you're absolutely right about everything you've said. I violated policy, I abandoned my post, and I put myself in danger. But Tommy Chen is alive because of those violations." Dr. Coleman's expression softened slightly, revealing the conflict she was experiencing between administrative responsibility and human compassion. "Emma, you've been an excellent nurse for 15 years. Your patient care has been exemplary, and your dedication to children has never been questioned. But I cannot ignore what happened today." "I'm not asking you to ignore it," Emma replied. "I'm prepared to accept whatever consequences you determine are appropriate." Dr. Coleman pulled out a formal letter from her clipboard. "Effective immediately. You are suspended pending a full investigation. Depending on the findings, this could result in termination of your employment. I'm sorry, Emma, but I have no choice." Emma accepted the letter with steady hands, though her heart was breaking. The document represented the end of everything she had worked for, the career that had defined her identity and purpose. But as she heard Tommy's laughter from the next bed, she knew she would make the same choice again. Dr. Coleman hesitated at the curtain. "For what it's worth, Emma, what you did was extraordinary, wrong according to policy, but extraordinary nonetheless." Indeed, after Dr. Coleman left, Emma and Marcus sat in silence for several minutes, processing the reality of their new situation. Emma's income had been essential to their family budget, and finding another nursing position with a disciplinary record would be challenging at best. "What are we going to tell Sophia?" Marcus asked finally. Emma considered the question carefully. We tell her that sometimes people have to make difficult choices, and that her mother chose to save a little boy's life, even though it meant losing her job. Marcus nodded slowly. She'll be proud of you. We both are. Lisa Chen appeared at the curtain opening, her eyes red from crying, but her face radiant with gratitude. She was a petite woman in her early 30s, still wearing the soot-stained clothes from the fire evacuation. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Lisa Chen, Tommy's mother. I needed to thank you for what you did." Lisa's voice trembled with emotion. "The doctors say he's going to be fine because you got him out when you did. Another few minutes and—" Emma stood up, still feeling weak from smoke exposure, but wanting to meet Tommy's mother properly. "How is he doing?" "He's asking for you. He keeps talking about the nice nurse who crawled under his bed with him. Would you like to see him?" Emma looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Together they moved to Tommy's bed, where the 6-year-old was sitting up, an oxygen cannula in his nose, but his eyes bright and alert. "Tommy, this is Emma, the nurse who found you," Lisa said gently. Tommy's face lit up with recognition. "You said you would take me to my mommy, and you did." His voice was still hoarse from smoke inhalation, but his smile was brilliant. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes as she sat on the edge of his bed. "You were so brave, Tommy. You did everything exactly right." "My mommy says you're a hero," Tommy said seriously. "Are you really a hero?" Emma glanced at Lisa, then back at Tommy. "I'm just someone who cares about keeping children safe, just like your mommy does." Tommy nodded solemnly, then reached out to hug Emma, as she held the little boy who was alive. Because of her choice, Emma felt a peace that no career achievement had ever provided. Emma was released from the hospital that evening, with instructions to follow up with her primary care physician about potential long-term effects of smoke inhalation. The parking lot was full of news vans and reporters, forcing Marcus to drive around to a side exit to avoid the media attention. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the day's events and their implications. Emma stared out the window at the familiar streets of Riverside, wondering if she would find work in another town, whether they would have to sell their house, how dramatically their lives were about to change. Sophia was waiting at home with Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor who had agreed to babysit during the crisis. The 8-year-old ran to Emma the moment she walked through the door, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. "Daddy said you saved a little boy from a fire," Sophia said, looking up at Emma with admiration. "Are you okay? You smell like smoke." Emma knelt down to Sophia's level, studying her daughter's face and feeling overwhelmed by love and responsibility. "I'm fine, sweetheart. The little boy is fine too. His name is Tommy, and he's about your age." "Did it hurt to go in the fire?" Sophia asked, with the directness of childhood. Emma considered how to answer honestly without frightening her daughter. "It was scary and difficult, but I knew I had to help Tommy because he was all alone and afraid." Sophia nodded seriously. "Like when I helped the kids at school who are being teased?" "Exactly like that," Emma agreed, amazed by her daughter's ability to understand complex moral situations. Sometimes helping people means doing things that are difficult or scary. That evening, after Sophia had gone to bed, Emma and Marcus sat at their kitchen table discussing their financial situation and employment prospects. Emma's suspension would become termination within the week, and they needed to plan for several months of unemployment while she searched for a new position. "I've been thinking about this all afternoon," Marcus said. "Maybe this is an opportunity to do something different. You've always talked about starting a pediatric home care service or working in schools. Maybe this is the push you needed to try something new." Emma appreciated Marcus's optimism, but she felt the weight of uncertainty about their future. At 38, starting over in her career felt daunting, especially with a disciplinary record that would follow her to any potential employer. They were reviewing their savings account balance when they heard the low rumble of multiple vehicles. Pulling into their driveway, Emma looked through the kitchen window and felt her heart stop. 20 black SUVs with government license plates were arranged in a precise formation around their modest home, their windows tinted dark and their occupants invisible. "Marcus," Emma said quietly, her voice tight with alarm, "call the police." Before Marcus could reach for his phone, there was a firm but polite knock at their front door. Emma peered through the peephole and saw a tall woman in a dark suit, flanked by several serious-looking men who were obviously security personnel. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Director Sarah Mitchell from the Department of Health and Human Services. Could we speak with you for a few minutes?" Emma looked at Marcus, who had gone pale with confusion and fear. This was not what either of them had expected. As a consequence of her rescue attempt, government agencies arriving in force suggested implications far beyond hospital disciplinary action. Emma opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. "What is this about?" Director Mitchell held up an official identification badge. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your actions today have come to the attention of some very important people in Washington. We'd like to discuss a proposition with you that could change your life significantly." Emma studied the woman's face, looking for signs of deception or threat. Director Mitchell appeared to be in her early 50s, with silver hair and intelligent eyes that conveyed authority and sincerity. "What kind of proposition?" Emma asked. "The kind that requires a security clearance to discuss in detail. May we come in? I promise, you're not in any trouble." Quite the opposite, actually. Emma looked back at Marcus, who nodded slowly. Whatever was happening, they needed to understand it. Emma unlatched the chain and opened the door, allowing Director Mitchell and 2 security agents to enter their home. Director Mitchell looked around their comfortable but modest living room, her gaze taking in family photos and Sophia's artwork displayed on the refrigerator. "You have a beautiful home, Mrs. Rodriguez, and from what I understand, a remarkable daughter." "Director Mitchell, what is this about?" Emma asked directly. "Why are there 20 government vehicles in my driveway?" Director Mitchell smiled. "Mrs. Rodriguez, are you familiar with the Federal Emergency Response Team Initiative? It's a classified program that recruits civilian specialists for rapid deployment during national emergencies." Emma shook her head, completely bewildered by the direction this conversation was taking. "Your actions today demonstrated exactly the kind of expertise and courage we look for in our recruits. Pediatric medical training, crisis decision-making, under pressure, and the willingness to risk personal safety for the welfare of children. These are rare and valuable qualities." Marcus found his voice. "Are you offering Emma a job?" Director Mitchell nodded. "Not just a job. A career with the federal government that would utilize her unique skills in emergency response situations involving children. The position comes with a salary of $180,000 annually, full federal benefits, and the opportunity to save children's lives on a national scale." Emma sat down heavily, trying to process what she was hearing. Hours earlier, she had lost her career for violating hospital policy. Now the federal government was offering her a position that seemed too good to be true. "What would this job actually involve?" Emma asked. "You would be part of a rapid response team that deploys to natural disasters, terrorist incidents, or other emergencies where children are at risk. Your medical training and demonstrated ability to connect with frightened children would be invaluable. In these situations," Director Mitchell pulled out a thick folder. "This contains preliminary information about the position, security clearance requirements, and relocation details. The program is based in Colorado Springs, about 2 hours from here, so you wouldn't have to leave the state." Emma looked at Marcus. seeing the amazement in his expression. Their financial worries, her career concerns, all of it was potentially solved by an opportunity she never could have imagined. "There's one more thing," Director Mitchell added. "The selection committee was particularly impressed by your willingness to violate protocol when a child's life was at stake. That kind of moral courage is exactly what we need in someone who might have to make split-second decisions in crisis situations." Emma realized that what had seemed like the worst decision of her career was actually being viewed as her greatest qualification for this new opportunity. The very act that had cost her everything was now opening doors she never knew existed. "When would you need an answer?" Emma asked. "Take your time to review the materials and discuss it with your family. But Mrs. Rodriguez, opportunities like this don't come along often. You have a gift for protecting children, and we'd like to help you use that gift on a much larger scale." After Director Mitchell and her team left, Emma and Marcus sat in their kitchen, surrounded by government documents that outlined a future they had never imagined. Sophia's crayon drawings looked down at them from the refrigerator, reminding them that whatever decision they made would affect their daughter's life as well. "6 hours ago, I thought my career was over," Emma said softly. "Now the federal government wants to pay me almost 4 times my hospital salary to do essentially the same thing on a national level." Marcus reached across the table to take her. "And, Emma, this is incredible. It's like the universe is rewarding you for doing the right thing." Emma thought about Tommy Chen, probably sleeping peacefully in his hospital bed, alive because she'd been willing to risk everything to save him. She thought about the other children who might need someone willing to break the rules to save their lives. The choice, when she really considered it, wasn't difficult at all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.